Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Welcome to 2023. We're kicking off the year, first video of the year with a brand new series. So many of you, we just finished up the pint-sized table runner for 2022 and people are already like, where's the next project? I'm so glad that you've been enjoying kind of this monthly series. If you are unfamiliar with pint-sized table runner, be sure to go back. Check out those videos. Fun piecing as well as applique kits are still available. Who knows how long those will last, so be sure to check that out. But this series is actually based on a club that we introduced a few years back in wool called the Simply Sweet Wool Club. Beautiful, all wool with the beautiful applique, hand embroidery, and so many people had said, I just wish you would offer that in the prefuse laser cut applique. I don't know how to work with wool. I don't want to work with wool. Well, here's the great news. We heard your request, and this is what this series will be all about. This is the Simply Sweet Table Toppers series, and I'm really excited to bring this to you. If you're like, I have never even seen this wool project before, limited kits available on that. Go ahead and check that out if you want to do the wool version. But here with our kit, what you're seeing is what you're going to get, and I love the prefuse laser cut component of this. So we're going to just jump into that, and notice I added a little bit of a twist to this. This one didn't have that additional colored background and then the center circle, so I wanted to change it up just a little bit. This is either a paid pattern that you can just pick that up, maybe use your own fabric, a PDF download, or of course my favorite is just picking up this kit that will absolutely include your pattern, your full-size diagrams, and of course all of your prefuse laser cut applique. Just like we've done with our other series, we always like to make the thread set an option. We know some makers have just a sewing room full of thread and maybe don't necessarily need that, whereas some people want that specific thread. For this particular project for February, we're going to always present those to you, by the way, the month ahead. This is January's project, actually February's project that we're releasing in January. So you have time to get the kit and make it to display it for that month. The thread set on this, and I'll just go over that, and they're going to be totally different each month depending on which of the different types of threads and thread weights that I use. These are two 50 weight cottons to be able to stitch down your applique shapes. This is a 12 weight that we have used to stitch around here and kind of almost emboss, almost a little bit of echo quilting both here and here, and I use that for some hand embroidery. And then this beautiful variegated thread, I think that's a 5 or an 8 pearl, is what we used right here in this beautiful vine detail around here. And I love the variegated because it makes it look like you used a lot of different thread, and that's just one of those. And of course the variegation changes as you stitch. So we'll move on to the hand embroidery elements of that in the end, but for now let's talk about how we prepare the scallop background. I had to think my way through that. How are we going to do that? Because nobody wants to nobody wants to turn something through and have to close something on the curve. If there's any way to avoid that, we want to do that. And I've got a technique. I'm going to show you that right now. The first thing inside your pattern is you're going to see this diagramming here. And this is going to kind of involve what we'll be doing. So I'm just going to go to that first. And of course, you're going to have that in two separate pages. And you'll see this bullseye mark. You can either use a light box or just kind of, you can see through the paper to line up both of those bullseyes and tape that together. Go ahead then, once that's perfectly registered, and cut exactly on that outermost line. And put that aside for now because we're going to be using that shortly. Once that's done, you'll get two of your fabrics. You'll have two of the polka dots that are each cut to 16 by 16, as well as a piece of fusible fleece. And these are oversized. I just grabbed that out of a kit. But you'll go ahead and place these right sides together. As such. And your fusible fleece, I love the fusible fleece because when we use batting, which you could use, there isn't a fusible component. You'll have to use a basting spray. So I love being able to avoid that. With the fusible fleece, you have kind of that scratchy side. That's the glue. Make sure, I've done this wrong. I've thought that the glue side was down, brought my iron over, and I managed to glue my fusible fleece to the bottom of my iron. A little bit embarrassing there. You're going to place this glue side down, and notice I'm on the back side of one of those pieces of the red polka dot, and you'll just iron this down well all the way around. Let's just pretend that I've done that just to save us a little bit of time. Then with your diagram that you would have cut out directly on the lines, we talked about that. You're just going to place this, obviously where you're seeing some of the fusible fleece, and I used a friction pen to trace around. And you want to be very careful that you don't let your diagram slip, that it's steady. And it's not really going to slide around on you, but just make sure that you're being very succinct about your tracing. Once that's done, I used my cool pins. This is, by the way, a new thing I have found. I think they've been out a while. Normally you see me using the extra fine pins from Clover, but whenever I've got more layers going on that involve batting, fusible fleece, I don't want to bend those extra fine. They're really meant for patchwork. So either grab the Clover fine or the cool pins. And I love this grip. So I'm just trying those out and I think they're amazing. So I've got some of those on the table. If you've got pins at home though, by all means use what you have. Pin everything together. Now I went to my sewing machine. I have a red thread and you could by all means be using your red thread not only to be stitching down your applique shapes, but to be stitching down here and later, as I did an 1/8 of an inch kind of a top stitch, I use that red thread again. So you have a lot of reasons to be using the red thread in particular on this project. I shortened my stitch length on this. Normally, I think most machines kind of default to a 2.5. I brought that back to a 2. The reason being is when I stitched exactly on that line, that shorter stitch length allowed me to stop exactly in this valley and then start stitching again. So that's a very important thing. And if you have a needle down function, engage that. That way, as you're approaching this valley, you're slowing down. And when you stop there, needle down, you're able to pivot and move now in the new direction and get going again. Go slow here because what you sew is what you're going to see here ultimately with this. That is, we're not leaving a side open for turning. We have a really cool technique so that we don't have to close our scallop on a curve. And you're like, thank goodness. I feel the same way. So once you've stitched all that down on a shortened stitch length with your red, now we'll remove the pins. And we're going to trim this a kind of a scant quarter. I don't want to leave too much out here because my goal is to have this turn nice and smooth. I'm going to use my Karen K Buckley scissors for these. I'll put that aside. So I would just recommend when you're trimming, initially you'll just be coming into the valley here and start trimming out here in the beginning. But then you might want to come in and add a few snips in here just in that valley so when you get ready to turn that through, it's much smoother. So I'll keep cutting this out. When I come back, we're going to show you how do we now turn this thing through when there's no open side. I'll be right back. So now that we have this all trimmed, did the scant quarter, clipped a little bit in those valleys. Don't get too close and potentially cut your thread. Now what you want to do is flip this over to the side that does not have the fusible fleece. And you want to kind of pinch that. In the pattern, we call it kind of grasping that. And you want to make absolutely sure that you do not have the other side. We're kind of creating a little bit of a gap. And you're kind of shooting for the middle. That's going to be important. The circle is going to help cover up what we're about to do here. So we're just going to make a snip. Maybe a little bit more than that. And if you have to go a little bit in both directions, that's fine. You're trying to make sure you stay within the footprint of this. And now we begin to turn the project through. So as I said, when I was thinking through the cotton version of this, I'm like, how are we going to manage to do that? With wool, it's no problem. Because with wool, you don't have necessarily a raw edge to worry about. You can add the backing fabric and do kind of a blanket stitch around the edge. Not so great with working with cotton. But this is a good solution, and as you can see, when the center's on, you cannot even tell where that opening is. So you can push that out with your hands all the way around. I absolutely have my Clover point turner, which does a great job of not only points, but also curves. I love that about Clover Notions, that they try as much as they can to make a dual function. A lot of times you buy a point turner, it's just the point. Well, they have this lovely curve here that I'm going to get inside there, and I'm just going to smooth everything out. And then we go right to our machine, our ironing mat, wool ironing mat, or your ironing board, whatever you've got. And we're just going to press everything out nice and smooth right away. One more spot in there. This is going to be the process we will follow for each of our 12 projects. Of course, the designs will be changing, the stitching will be changing, but this will be the way that you will prepare your background scallop every single time. So we'll give this a good press. Now, notice how I loaded the red thread into my machine, and that is what I use to stitch around that scallop directly on that drawn line with that shortened stitch length. Now I'm going to go back with that same thread, and you could either keep the shortened stitch length or bring that up to your normal stitch length. And this is where I added a little bit of top quilting, and we'll try to zoom in on that. Maybe I'll just go actually do a portion of it. Maybe we'll just zoom in on that because we have a lot of territory to actually cover for embroidery. So you can see, I just came in, I kind of gauged my distance. I think that's about 1/8, maybe a little bit generous. And I just stitched all the way around the edge. It's more of just a look. It helps it look finished. And it kind of just helps kind of lock that edge in. So it's not going to dive in for you later on, potentially. As you display the item and put it away year over year, it just kind of pushes that seam, kind of locks that seam down, and you're just kind of riding around that right there. It just gives it a nice finished look. Once that's done, you can almost put that aside for now, because now we're going to start working on that scallop. That too will also be laser cut for you, and isn't that lovely? You know, it's just wonderful to have all of that cut out for you. Now, a couple things here. This has a piece of fusible. All of the shapes have the fusible. I want to encourage you for this piece right here in the very beginning, don't take the fusible off. What we want to be able to do at this point is there's a couple things, of course, and that is to use our diagram. And I can see through it pretty good, but I can see through it so much better, obviously, with the wafer light box. I'm going to turn that on. And you can see now, that's just a dream, to be able to see where everything goes. Notice as you are putting your shapes down, and we'll just put some shapes down. I'm going to grab some of these, and I'll just show you what you can expect. Like, here's a great example. You're just going to pop those out. You'll have 3 of the pink plaid, 3 of the kind of dainty, kind of almost baby's breath in pink, and you've got 2 different reds again, and the larger hearts, and you 3 of those larger hearts. So I did every other one. So as you're laying them out, it's just like paint by numbers, like when we were kids, right? So not that. You're going to skip this one. This is why people love laser cut kits. If you're going to pick up the pattern and maybe do this from home, there's things that you'll need to do. Be sure to pick up some heat and bond light. You'll need to be able to do that and use this to be able to trace around your shapes. Obviously, roughly cut around that, and then cut precisely on the line, peel off the paper, and do the step I'm doing right now. So, but if you're picking up the kit, you can skip all of that because we're just going to jump straight into the fun. Now, notice how I'm just laying these out to show you how we initially lay everything out. So you just keep laying all the hearts out, the center out, and you can iron that down. One thing I want to give you an option for is notice how on the red hearts, there's a little bit of embroidery. You might consider, I'm just going to lift this away. You might consider, I can just, if I turn this up all the way, I can see the line, that dash line, and the arrow where that's going to be. Or, and if you did that, you would want to mark that now with a white marking pen. And I kind of can't turn that up just because of the overhead. I can barely see it, but I do see it. And even when I see it, I love being able to use a straight edge because even if I can see it, it's far easier to just draw along a straight edge, right? And then of course I know that my lazy daisies are going to just be back there. So you can do that now for these, or just put them on later and then bring the ruler back and draw them on kind of just by sight. So I just wanted to mention that is one thing you might consider doing in advance. All right, so you're going to iron everything down to your background, but I want to call particular attention to the embroidery. Normally when I draw embroidery, trace embroidery, I use a friction pen. But remember that friction pens erase with heat. And so knowing we're going to absolutely be ironing this is fusible on the back, ironing this to the background, if we use a friction pen, all of those drawn lines will be gone. All of those will be gone. So for that reason, we need to be using a micron. I've got a 005 in black. We will be using the same process again all throughout the journey of this series. If you're inclined to pick up this set that's got multiple colors, you can. I don't think it's actually completely necessary. I do want to throw that out there that we do have some different color pens, the set, or you can just use a black each time and kind of use a lighter hand. So our goal here, whenever I'm tracing things like the line, I draw that line out and I need to know where that line is. But I don't draw the exact shape of that lazy daisy. Now this is a step that we must do now before we iron everything down to the background, because once that's on my red background, I'm not going to be able to see through it. So this step must happen, and I'll just do a little bit of the beginning of that tracing so you understand the process, and you'll want to make sure this is not moving while you're tracing. This is not an erasable pen. So what you see is going to be down. Now, I said that where I have, in this instance, what you're seeing here are seed beads. Those are in your kit, by the way. I couldn't resist adding. They're just so sweet. All I do is a simple dot. It just says, put that seed bead right there. Very subtle. As for the lazy daisies here, because lazy daisies are all just a little bit different, I'm not going to draw that entire shape. I'm just going to draw where it starts. Just a little bit of an indication like right here, right here. So I wanted to show you one of those, how I trace this out. The reason I don't draw that full lazy daisy is if I make my lazy daisy and it doesn't completely fill the shape I drew, and a lot of times they don't, now you're seeing the drawing and it's not what we want to be doing. So let's look at that. So you can see I absolutely know where I'm going to do my back stitch. Each little dots will be where we'll put our seed bead, and that's kind of the base of our French knot. We'll be going over the stitching specifically in the second part of that video. So as I said, we're just going to, you would obviously continue doing all of that tracing, lay out all of your shapes. I'm just going to iron a few of those down so you kind of get the gist of this. The iron needs to be on a medium heat. Any fusible webbing really does not do well with the hottest temperatures that we use as quilters. So I know my default is always crank it up to the hottest setting. Well, we want to make sure that we're not doing that with a fusible webbing. So of course we're going to just be putting our shapes down here, and I'm going to make mine kind of match what I've got going on here. So you are seeing my same sight picture. Just like that. We'll adjust that. And of course, keep putting some of those down. And of course, we would put our center down. I'm just going to, again, put on some of these shapes. Now we know we need to move over. So you can either take the paper with it, which is fine. That's not going to hurt anything. And now straight down, just straight down. No kind of swishing back and forth. And you might want to do a portion of this at a time. It's a little more manageable to do this in maybe thirds or half versus trying to put everything down and make sure that nothing moves, right? So I often do that. The bigger the picture of the applique, the more I do this in these smaller sections so I don't bump anything when I move it from one place to the other. Okay. So you can see why I decided to leave this backing on. If I had taken this off the back right now, when I tried to iron these things down, this would now be wanting to fuse to my wool mat. So this is why you want to wait until all of that is completely down. And then in the very end, are you removing this from the back here? We'll grab our shape. And of course, iron everything down. I'm done with my light box. Let's get that out of the way. A lot of things on the table. And I just kind of visually was lining up this valley with this valley and saying, okay, I think that's about the same distance. You could put a ruler to that if you want to. Again, bring this one. I love my quilting friends. I love these from Creative Grid. Talk about a great gift. If you've got a quilting friend that's like, has everything, you're like, I have no idea what to get this person. We have the I Love My Quilting Friends rulers in a variety of colors, I think 7 colors. So that may be a great gift idea. But I think when you're just wanting to measure something, it's such a great ruler to have on hand. Once you're satisfied that that is exactly where you want it to be, now we'll iron this down to the background. That place where we turned our project through is completely covered up. And my favorite part, I didn't have to close on a corner, or on a curve rather. I would say for projects that I've had to do that with, it's a little bit challenging, right, to get that nice and smooth. So you will not have to worry about that all throughout this series. Okay, so you can imagine if all of the hearts were on, all of our embroidery was on. The next step that I encourage you to do, I was debating, do I go do the hand embroidery or do I stitch my shapes down? Because I'm in very close contact with the embroidery, it's best to go ahead and stitch your shapes down. I want to take this to the machine. We can zero in on what we've done here. What I've done is right along the edge here, I just did a straight stitch fairly close, trying to keep the same distance. You could do a blanket stitch, anything that you'd want. Maybe if your machine has a decorative stitches on it, maybe you want to try that. This might be a great opportunity. So let's go to the sewing machine. And I am just going to start with on the edge and just stitching around. One thing I wanted to mention, I should have mentioned before, is because this does have a fusible, and I'll grab these needles for you real quick here to show them to you. This is the size, this is the super nonstick size 80-12. It is engineered to work beautifully with fusible, to not gum up the needle, not break the thread. It works lovely. And this is ideal for a 50 weight. Out here, when I did just a little bit more of the echo quilting, and I'll kind of bring that in close so you can see that, I used a 12 weight thread here, a much thicker thread, and it really needs a bigger needle, and that is on that one, the super nonstick size 116. So these are the two that we'll be using throughout the entire program. And with that heavier 12 weight thread is when I did come back and also do a little bit of the hand embroidery, and that's why I chose the 12 weight. You can choose to do the stitching on the outside here. You can see the thread is a little bit thicker, and all I did was simply load the 12 weight in the top. I still had a 50 weight in my bobbin in a coordinating color, and then I just did that stitching around the edge. And that's how you do all of the machine applique here and any of the echo quilting that you might want to do. So now we'll move on to hand embroidery, assuming all of your applique shapes have already been sewn down. So we're going to start with the Pearl 8. I love, again, that variegation. You can see the change of color. It makes it exciting. Right away, we see that we have a lazy daisy. I think I'm going to go ahead and stitch that lazy daisy and then do a little bit of back stitch and then come and grab that lazy daisy. Let's go ahead and do that. Then we add the seed beads in the end. So we'll start off here. I've got a single strand of Pearl 8 needles. I should have talked about that. You've got a couple of choices. We have the chenille needle, which is the size 22. We also have embellishing needles. I've used both of these. Both of them work very well on the project. This is a longer needle. If you have either one of those that have a big enough eye to accommodate the pearl, you are fine. Either one of these will work. If you like working with a longer needle, go ahead and get the embellishing. If you like it shorter, you can get the chenille. Really, I feel like they kind of both get the job done. And we'll talk about the straw needles later. They're extremely fine, and they're meant to go with the seed beads. A seed bead is far too the diameter. It's just a little bit too small to fit on the chenille or the embellishing needle. So let's go ahead. I've knotted the end. We're going to start off with the lazy daisy. Probably one of my favorite stitches. We're just going to come up at the base of that, and I'm going to actually turn it. It's going to be a little easier for you to see it. So here's where we are, right? This is what we're going for, where we want. It's like I kind of think of it almost as a little bit of a teardrop. So we can see our angles kind of coming off. We've kind of drawn that kind of direction. So I'm going to trap that with my thumb. And I know if you're left-handed, by the way, it's very difficult to watch me right-handed. I brought this book out for you. It includes things for left-handed and right-handed. and it has illustrations. So if you're curious about, you want a kind of a step-by-step visual guide in your sewing room, go ahead and grab that. Create a loop here, and you come down about the distance of what you want that lazy daisy to be. As I pull that through, it creates that teardrop, and I anchor that on the other side of that line. Now, I'm just going to come back at the base of this, and I'm going to start stitching that back stitch. You're going to go down a certain distance, and your goal is to hit that line every time with the needle and slit that. And now move back toward yourself. And down again. And you see that base right there? That's the base for the next lazy daisy. I'm going to probably stitch past that and come back right now. Then what we can do is go ahead and grab that lazy daisy, pop that in. We can also do it from this side. I don't always have to turn it around and go toward me if you want to kind of keep moving. Again, you want them to be about the same size unless you want them to be deliberately a little bit of a different size. That's fine. We'll anchor that back there. Then I'm going to come back and I continue downstream. And I can see a thread change, a thread color change is happening. That's fun to see that. The lighter color's coming. And we continue moving downward on the line. It's kind of fun to be able to mix up the back stitching with the French knot. There's the variegation starts to really come into play. And so you're going to continue your vines this way all the way around. Now when you get ready to tie off, just be shallow. You're digging into the back of the fabric and maybe the fusible fleece. Just make sure you didn't come to the front. Some people don't like seeing the stitching on the back. First off, I don't think anyone should be flipping your projects over to see the back. All right, I hope not. But if it bothers you to have the stitching, and I know for some people it might, seeing this on the back, your option would be to basically, instead of doing the technique that we did, is that you would fuse this to just that top layer, do the embroidery. Now you would bring the backing right side together, turn it through, but you would have to close that on an opening at that point. So that is an option for you. And I thought about that, but I love how embossed this looks. That's because it went down through fusible fleece, through the backing, right? There's something to sink into. And also, as I tied off my thread, as I was having to change thread, because you don't want to have too long of a length, you're not seeing the green thread poking behind the cream because it's down behind and on the back of my project. So that is why I opted to take this route with that. Once you've done that and you've completed that, the other stitching I want to do is actually the running stitch. This is now with our ecru, and a really fun and simple stitch with just a few more of the lazy daisies kind of as the end of our arrow. And then the very end, let's talk about applying some seed beads. So here, very straightforward. I'm just going to come up here, come down to the point of our arrow, for that running stitch, you have a couple of options. You can stay shallow where you're actually not going to the back. How you would do this is here and rock the needle. And so I'm very shallow, not going to the back. Here, rocking that needle. So I'm in between, I'm in that sandwich. You're not seeing that fabric or that thread back here. So that is another option to kind of reduce what is being seen on the back of the project. Down, shallow, rock the needle. So now everything is pretty much up on the surface and we're just not seeing it on the back. Yes, certainly where we started, but you know, between the polka dots, it kind of gets all mixed in. And of course, you're going to continue to the end. I'm going to pop right back up there because what we're going to do now is we are going to go down. And we know this stitch. We just learned this stitch. This is our lazy daisy. Over that edge. Then off to the side. We'll do one on the left, one on the right. Lazy daisy, trap that with your thumb. There we go. You do one on the opposite side, and then I just kind of stagger that down just a touch. These are ones I don't even draw on. They're just, you kind of just seeing the diagram and trying to mimic that. Go a little bit bigger on that one. There we go. Of course, and then you're going to come back here, do one that way, here, do one that way, and you're done. So that's how you'll complete the running stitch. And then the last thing that we'll do is seed beads. If you don't like seed beads, you could certainly use your red thread and potentially do a different stitch, maybe do some French knots. I think seed beads are a lot of fun. They add a lot of charm. So let me go ahead and thread a needle. We'll be using a straw needle for this, and I'll be using my 50 weight thread, and then I will show you how to apply our seed beads. So for the seed beads, I like to use the straw needle. Really, anything that's going to fit, that seed bead will fit through. And the easiest way is to just put your seed beads in a bowl. They tend to roll away if you don't. And you just kind of, if the seed bead can go through, you're good to go, right? We know that with these bulkier needles that I was using before, there's no way those will fit through. A little bit challenging to thread. We do have a couple needle threaders on the website if you're having any struggles with that. So I just grabbed the red thread that I had been sewing down on my 50 weight sulky, knotted that as before. Of course, all of our embroidery would be down already. So I am just coming up. I don't even try to pick them up with my fingers. I simply go to my bowl, pick up my bead. It's on. I come back down. Make sure it's there. And then I get an idea. Sometimes I poke through and go, okay, this is my destination, right? This is where I'm going to go next. I go very shallow. I don't want to stay up on the surface. You don't want a lot of that maze crisscrossing. The thread can get broken if it gets caught on something, and you don't want, it's unsightly. So I try to bury that, but I also make sure I'm not coming to the front. Once I'm at the next place, see how it's nice and tidy here. I flip it over and once again pop up where I want to have another bead. Go to my bowl, pick it up, it's on, down it goes. Okay, and then I'm like, okay, there's my next spot. I kind of flip it over. So I'm like, all right, where am I going to travel to? I'm here. I want to go there. You can maybe just put your thumb on that spot. And again, you're going to travel very shallow. So you're popping up at about that spot. And notice how we keep nice and neat here, but we're popping up where we need to be. And of course, you're going to add the next seed bead and you'll just tie off as you normally would in the back. We can just tie off real quick. Shallow again, going underneath. Tie off at least 2 or 3 times. Shallow, kind of making that loop, going underneath that. And then again, we can run shallow in the background. Make sure we didn't catch anything up front. And then we trim. So that is well buried. That is not going to come undone. It's not like there's a knot sitting on the surface. It's knotted and the tail is running well underneath. And then of course you're going to have, this is what the finished product will be. And just that little dainty touch of the seed beads, and they're beautiful. They have this little shimmer to them. Just adds a perfect little dainty touch to this really sweet Valentine table topper. So you can see this fun Valentine table topper can definitely be done in one day. You know, I love quilting and I love these smaller projects too. It just seems like the beautiful quilt on the couch or the wall, but also that lovely entry table, that accent table having this smaller project. It's just like the perfect combination. So I'm so excited about this new series. I am well underway with choosing the fabrics for the next projects. Be sure to pick up your kits, very limited in quantity. Of course, thread sets, any needles or notions or anything you might need. Subscribe, let a friend know about this fun new series, and I will see you next month for our Simply Sweet Table Topper series. We'll see you then.